Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's conversation. I'm here again with Chris Burton, with whom I did part one of our podcast together. And Chris Burton has been talking about some very important things that I think all of us need to be listening to and hearing more about. We heard all of Chris's initial life story, his work as a Silicon Valley entrepreneur in IT, and starting many businesses in IT and being highly accomplished and highly successful. And then we heard about the onset of a very strange covert ops, black ops program that suddenly drew him into it, a voice to skull program. And it's something that he has termed the voice to skull program. Now, many other people have come forward and they're talking about voice to skull technology. And we know that this is military technology. There are patents for it. People have been reporting it actually for decades at this point. And we know that the military conducts very dark and secret experiments on people. So there's all of that as context and background. And I'm here, I've talked a little bit with Chris about the gravity and the seriousness and intensity of this program. And this is one of the things that we hope to convey with this conversation today, the gravity of the situation. Because what this program is actually doing is it's not merely putting voices into people's heads. It's literally rewiring people's brains, and it's taking over people's brains. And it's doing this through a variety of technologies, which have to do with EEG cloning and EEG heterodyning, harvesting people's brain waves, and then taking other people's brain waves and putting them into people's heads, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, the end result is a kind of clone, which is really another person's brain entering one person's brain, taking it over, and also being able to biorobotize that person, ultimately taking over all aspects of the cortexes, all the different cortices of the brain, and taking over, the sensory cortex, the motor cortex, moving people back and forth, and being able to move their arms and legs, being able to engage, forcing speech through their mouth, forcing speech through their vocal cords, things like that. So that's just to give you a taste of what is going on. And there are connections here with various other programs that we know from our nation's history, with the MK Ultra programs, with the Manchurian candidate programs, and so on and so forth. So this really is the living, breathing, current day Manchurian candidate program that's being kept under wraps, we think, by the CIA and the DIA and all those other covert agencies and operations. And we are here to talk about the incredible invasion of human rights this is, the incredible violation of privacy this is, and how everybody in America needs to hear about it and needs to start doing something about this. Because if this is what they can do, think about who they can do it to, and think about who's going to be next. So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me, and we can pick up and talk again, both about the technology and both about, your story, your entire life experience as you went through this experience.
Thank you, Ramola. Thanks for the introduction. What you're saying is so important, and I think this, my story is something that is, shocking, and it's horrific, and it's something that people can point to when they're trying to explain these technologies to other people. This story, is a 13-year story that we're kind of putting into 2 or 3 podcasts, but the written interview goes into much more detail. Yeah. And then I have a YouTube video that goes into even more detail than that. Mm-hmm. But what we are talking about today are these technologies that are doing everything you're saying. They are not just forcing. When we talk about forced speech, it's not something that you're not, a word or a sound and you're not sure where it came from. No. We're talking about long conversations with a person who's speaking through you, and you are just another person within your mind. You can't. All you hear is the speech coming through you, and you can't think their thoughts. You're not, sharing their mind in any way. It's just like a cell phone that's broadcasting through your body, but it's controlling your muscles and your breathing. I mean, that's what forced speech is. It is another person talking to you, you know, in my case, I mean, all day long at times, just depending on the torture. We were talking about biorobotization. These aren't little flicks of a finger and you're not sure, you know, where it came from. And, these are full body takeovers. And I'll describe a story for you later that goes into me being asked to pull over my car in Palo Alto, where I was working for a startup company, so that they could perform some tests on me using some waves they claimed they had just developed. And I pulled over the car, and they hit me with 4 waves that moved my body, my hand like this first, then my entire arm like this for 5 minutes apiece. And then my right foot, they called it the gas pedal wave, and it extended, as if I was pressing the gas pedal 20 or 30 times. And then they hit me with a torso wave, which made my entire upper body move back and forth in my car from the seat to the steering wheel for 15 to 20 minutes. I thought I was dying. I thought they were killing me with this wave. I mean, this is what biorobotization is. It takes you over, and then later, a year and a half later, they performed a full Manchurian candidate takeover of me. And this is a person moving you like a marionette, moving your body like a marionette, standing you up, walking you around, sitting you down, standing you back up, and talking to you the whole way through it. This is what happened to me, and this is what's going on with this Manchurian candidate project. So I knew I was in for it, Romola, when I was in Palo Alto and they were revealing all of these technologies for speech, and they do it in gradual steps because they're always trying to make you think that you've been exposed to everything the technology can do, but you never are. They're revealing these things in graduated steps so they can maximize the terror and the fear in you. So imagine sitting there one day and then someone just starts speaking through you. And that's what happened to me. I was just sitting there in my house in Palo Alto, the place that I was renting a room in, and all of a sudden the voice said, "Hi, Chris, this is Joe." And it was my cousin Joe's voice coming through me. And it was lower than I speak. And while they went through the forced speech, they demonstrated how it can lower your voice an octave or more, lower than how you normally speak. So that's what these technologies can do, and they can manipulate you in all sorts of different ways. And so we'll get into that, but that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, everything that you have just said is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, the fact that the forced speech taking over and actually running whole conversations through your mouth and through your tongue and through your vocal cords. And the very last thing that you said, that the voice morphing that they can do is so sophisticated that it can completely translate your voice into somebody else's voice while using your bodily construct to do so, using your brain and your entire body to do that, your vocal cords.
The voice transformation is incredible. I mean, they can make you speak with this kind of electronic, almost synthesized sounding voice. So, it's an output that they are then, sending through you, transmitting through you. So when you're going through this, you think in analog terms, you think about, electronic, electric, nerve impulses. But what they're doing is much more sophisticated than that. When they did these waves to me in the car, they felt like analog sort of waves. They felt like waves that someone had just discovered that had these attributes, and they were pulsed. So they shook my hand at a perfect, at a perfect frequency. in mathematically perfect intervals. So like a metronome, but really fast. It's faster than what I can do here. The way my hand is kind of moving all over the place, you know, when you try to do this yourself, that's not what it was doing. It was almost perfectly straight, but moving in perfect, and you know, from one side to the other without moving further to one side or further to the other, all within the same range, but really fast.
Very
So you
rhythmic,
think,
very modulated, amplitude modulated. Yeah.
yes. So that makes you think that, well, these are waves they've just discovered that have, you know, that one affects this part of your mind and, you know, fires these muscles. But, and then you think, wow, that's incredible technology. At the time, I thought they were killing me. But then they bring you back. They make you think, well, you're part of this program, and, you know, it's really important. It's research. And, you know, I'm in Palo Alto. So they walk me around downtown Palo Alto and talk to me through me the whole time. I just wore an earpiece. If anybody listened to what I was talking about, it was me talking to myself, you know, having a conversation with myself. And
was your mouth moving at the time?
Oh yeah, when they speak through, your mouth moves just like this. So you know, they can speak to you through your mind, through traditional voice to skull, and when they use you know, voice transformation technology to create voices, it's incredible. And they built a treatment. We talked about treatments last time. These are really intricate stories and scenarios that are built up day after day. They always have, you know, they've always are kind of a continuation of what happened the day before that, and they lead you to believe that, you know, you're important. You're going to be released. You're in this, you know, it always has to do with voice to skull. You're in this program with this, you know, incredible technology, but they never let you go. They just make you think that you're going to be let go. So, you know, they would use these voices. We talked about John Hickenlooper. That's when they first introduced the voices, the voice transformation technology. You know, they do it in a very smart way. Only in little, they just give you a little bit of it to make you think you're, you know, they're granting you, you know, some access to you know, in this case, in John Hickenlooper's case, it was this inquiry that the State Department was putting on. In other cases, they've used voice transformation technology to make me think that ex-colleagues of mine are involved. And, you know, that was particularly scary because for a period of months, they made me tried to make me believe that my ex-colleague of mine from CompuCom Systems, a very important person there, was brought into the torture to try to help me get through it. You know, they knew they were putting that in order to kind of innovate this technology, they had to torture me, and that she was kind of monitoring it with my uncle, who's an aerospace engineer, MIT educated. He's retired now. He put up the Milstar satellite array, and a very important person. So they made me think that he was involved, and they knew I had worked with this woman from CompuCom, and had spoken to her, you know, a year previously to when they started this, and so they built this up, and they would tell me that she was, you know, kind of laughing when I would kind of crack a joke, a sarcastic joke or something to the voice to scullers, and then eventually they used her exact voice in this elaborate treatment that we can talk about later. Involving all sorts of celebrities that have some sort of relationship to me. They used Trey Parker, and I grew up in Morrison. He grew up in Evergreen. We're a few miles away from each other. We know a lot of the same people. We went to CU together, have a lot of the same friends. They used him. They made it sound as if Trey Parker had been brought in. They used voice transformation technology and matched his voice perfectly. They brought in Mark Zuckerberg. They brought in Marissa Mayer. My consulting company did business with Yahoo. So we were doing desktop deployments, which was a vital kind of lockdown, you know, project for their server and desktop environment. And they brought her in as if, you know, she was now involved. and a number of other celebrities that were kind of had to do with my cousin Joe, who went to a private school in LA. So when they find this stuff out about you, they do they'll create any personality with this voice transformation technology and then wrap it all up. And in my case, this giant treatment, which was the culmination of 10 years at that point, of making me think more and more people, friends of mine, politicians in Denver, some of these celebrities that might be from Denver, were involved in trying to help me out, trying to get me out of voice to skull, whatever it was.
So definitely when we go into that particular treatment, definitely tell us more about it, because I know there's a long story associated with it, and you've touched on it a little bit in the interview, the print interview. But we'll definitely go into it. The other thing I would really like if you went into it at some point is this whole notion of what these voice discoverers are telling you about this being, about whatever it is, the stories that they're building up. They've got a whole series of little fictional treatments that they're, working you through and telling you stories of different kinds, and then how it's related to torture and how you experience it, and what the relationship to torture is. Because, one of the subjects that we really want to touch on today is torture, and how this is all related to the CIA's history of torture, the KGB's history of torture, the Kubark manual, and so forth. We'll bring it all back and we'll contextualize it for everybody so people begin to understand what this is about. And you've even got voices in your head saying, this is an experiment, you're part of an experiment, and this is all for the good of humanity, and great things are going to come out of this, etc., etc. Well, we want to take that apart and relate how all of this assault on your brain is related to torture. So thanks so much, Chris. Let's start from, the story. I think you have your notes in front of you. You kind of know where we left off in terms of your own story. So maybe just take us through that a little bit.
Okay, great. So we spent a lot of time on treatments, and I described 3 of them, very elaborate. And then we were talking about some of these things that the torturers do that make it so clear in your mind that they're human beings. They reveal personality traits unwittingly. These aren't things like like an accent or something like that. These are things like diction, word usage, grammar. Some might, speak more like an academic and pair prepositions with the word which a lot of academics, might do. I'm from Colorado. We don't really, I went to a public school, and so we didn't have that kind of influence in our English classes. So, none of my friends, including, Harvard, Harvard-trained medical doctors, don't speak like that. But they do. One in particular, torturers, spoke like that and still does all the time. So, these are things that stand out, and that your mind, wouldn't be able to even put together while they're describing this, situation that you're currently in and what's happening. The way I described John Hickenlooper, this ongoing drama about John possibly putting me into this program, and why did he do it? And my friends are pounding their fists. What's going on? But nobody can tell me about it because it's all top secret. It's, this is what they do. So the other thing is the protocol that the torturers use. The torturers, one of the most important things they do while they're torturing you is to protect their anonymity. And we've seen studies that people who are anonymous wear masks, torture and murder much more frequently than people who don't. This was a study that I don't know if for some reason I think I was researching my book and was reading Better Angels of My Nature and came across this. But these were some tribes, warrior tribes in Africa. Okay. And it proved, it showed that 60-70% kill and torture, and those were the tribes that wore masks. But what the
Very
the
interesting.
the anonymity part is very important because they're speaking all the time. They're constantly torturing you, and we'll talk about what the torture is. They're building up to these scenarios while they're just breaking, they're insulting you, they're just using all of these torture techniques that we talked about last time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll read those off in a second, but you know, when you're following the protocol, you're not talking about, these torturers are never mentioning where they went to school, where they grew up, what nationality they are. You know, they don't give away anything, any personal information whatsoever. Schools, you know, what's the weather like today? You know, anything like that. What their favorite football team is. You know, we have had 75,000 hours of conversation, and they've never revealed anything like this. So these personality traits, you know, this makes it impossible to kind of pretend to be a god or a devil or something, because they make mistakes, they make factual errors, you know, they make grammar errors, you know, they make, you know, when you're talking so much, you're having to pull things out and say things, and sometimes they're just inaccurate. They have inaccurate information about the law or history, things that you might know that they got wrong. And so they don't try to become, you know, gods or something like that. Maybe people who are tortured in a small, you know, sessions would face something like that. But and it would be pretty powerful. Yeah.
Are you talking about people who are just like a normal bunch of people, perhaps with no special education or knowledge, who are just sitting around in a room, and they're sort of, you know, throwing voices into your head, and you can hear those voices, and they're having these conversations? And are they the same people who show up for all of the different conversational scenarios or treatments that you've been talking about?
Yep. Primarily, it's the same group of people. In my interview, I described the first voices I heard coming from a man and a woman who sounded like they were, you know, mature people, and they were discussing my company. And so that was the beginning of them building up this kind of terrorizing couple weeks where you first think it's a practical joke. Who's doing it? How are they doing it? You spend the first day working on that. The second day, you know, they're talking about you. Again, I described them using mirrored conversations for the first 5 years. Then they began speaking just directly to me. But using mirrored conversations, describing what I'm doing, what I just said on the phone. And, you know, that lasted for another couple days. And they would leave, you know, for maybe an hour or two, and then come back. And I thought, well, this must be my neighbors, because they just went out together to go to the grocery store, or, you know, do an errand. So your mind is trying to figure out what is going on, but they're doing this on purpose. Now, after 3 days, 4 days, you know, this is becoming the worst practical joke that has ever been played on somebody. And you're starting to kind of figure out that they're not mentioning themselves, but that would also make sense if they're playing a joke on you. They don't want you to know who they are. So, you know, that's when it became really psychological after about, you know, 4 or 5 days. And then it just, you know, as I described in the interview, they made me think for the first half a year my neighbors were involved. They only talked to me on Voice to Skull when I was driving my car and when I was in my loft in Denver. And for 3 years they did that, which made me think that I had transmitters in my walls and in my car. So I dug into my drywall trying to find, you know, a transmitter. But that was all made to make me think that somebody nearby, my downstairs neighbors, the loft across the alley from me, a parking garage, you know, someone that, you know, in downtown Denver was transmitting this. So that's the beginning of a long-term treatment that started to then include people like my friends. Why, you know, they were involved. Why were they involved? They would then start voice to sculling me at my friend's house. So I think they might have been involved. And so it's all about building up these treatments that are all about, you know, and they're layered together. So one treatment is long-term, having to do with 3 of your friends being involved. Another treatment is just, you know, let's pound torture into Chris for 24 hours straight. And so, and we talked about these techniques, and then we kind of go through them again. These are the psychological torture techniques that are used on voice-to-skull victims all the time. This is kind of the guidebook they use while they're building up treatments. You know, you're always in this program. You don't know why you're being tortured. You don't know why they have to, you know, use, keep you kind of bound to this, to their nonstop comments, that your binded conversations. You're stuck to them. You can't get out of it. You don't know why, but it must be for a reason. You know, this technology goes through walls. You know, it follows you everywhere you go. You know, and you don't know the capabilities of it. Back then, I didn't know the capabilities of it. Later, when they started the, you know, forced speech and everything, then you realize, oh my gosh, it's even bigger. But by then, they've built up this treatment, to the extent that, you know, you might think Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are involved or the president's involved. You know. Because it's such incredible technology, and they're always telling you, you're in this program for a reason, Chris. We thought you were strong. We thought you could handle it. You know, they're telling you that the whole time. And what's going on is they're preparing you for the Manchurian Candidate transformation. You know, they are collecting your evoked potentials for years and building this kind of blueprint of your mind. And now, you know, after a few years of this, they're able to, they've copied all of your words, whatever you've said out of your mouth. They've copied that information, those evoked potentials. Any movement in your body, they've copied that information. You know, from your evoked potentials in your brain, and now they can start doing this transformation into a full kind of Manchurian Candidate takeover. And at that point, it becomes more mental. After they've been able to map your brain and move your body around, now they're going to try to, you know, turn your thoughts into their thoughts, replace your consciousness with their consciousness. And so we're talking about breaking ethical, you know, boundaries, you know, crossing ethical lines.
Every step of the way.
Every step of the way. And they always find a new line to cross, you know. So we can, you know, talk about that as we go on.
Yeah, I was going to say definitely, you know, that's you've kind of already you've sort of dived headfirst into what these treatments are all about and what they're doing, and you know, I have lots of questions about that, but I'll hold that for later. I think what would be very interesting for viewers to hear is once again going back to the narrative. You know, the story of what was happening in your life at the time, because we kind of went through that arc a little bit. So if we could pick up that arc again, and then, you know, sort of jump in every now and then and supplement with a little bit more about these treatments here and there, that would work, I think. So we just kept the arc of the narrative going.
Okay, great. So thank you. It's you know, there's so much to talk about with this stuff. So it's easy to kind of get off on tangents, but we covered the treatments pretty well, I think, in the first podcast. So at this point, Michael Rains had gang-stalked me. He had videotaped me. He shook me down for money. And then I moved back to Denver. Everything was fine. The voices started. After about 2 or 3 months of this.
Can I just pause for just 1 second, just to help viewers sort of reorient to your story? So, you know, just to do a little brief gist of what we talked about earlier. We talked about how, you know, you were living a very successful life, you know, in San Francisco, and then you moved back to Denver, right? You'd started a new company, and you were staying with this person, Michael Rains, and that was where you started to become aware of something very strange going on. He was, in a sense, stalking you and listening to your conversations and so forth. And then at one point, he told you he was actually video recording you or recording you in some way, right? And
yeah, there's a witness to this. There's a witness to this. A fellow named Curtis, and he was Michael Rains, one of Michael Rains's friends. He witnessed the whole thing. So this isn't something that Michael can deny,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
And then later
So
on, you started to hear the voices, right? And you began to become convinced that Michael was a part of it, and so on and so forth. But in any case, I'll let you pick up that because I just wanted to sort of lay the groundwork for, the whole Michael story. Yeah.
yeah, well, so he, was overhearing my conversation. He was standing outside of my door, my bedroom door, and listening to my conversation. So I thought that was strange, but his friends were acting odd and pretending that they knew something about me. And, I would have pretty, personal, detailed conversations with my client who was a long-term client of mine. I had worked with him for 6 years at my other company before this project, and I didn't know if Michael knew that or not. But we talk about funny stories having to do with some of his friends who are executives, and a lot of goofy kind of Silicon Valley executive stories, Vegas stories, stuff like that. And then, we talk about taking a trip. We talked about taking a trip together one day, and that's when Michael started acting really kind of, strangely. He and his friends pretended that I was guilty of something. So he shook me down for money. I said, Michael, I didn't want to reveal more information than he needed to know, because at this point, some psychopath is telling you, he's videotaped you for the last, 3 months or something. He's done a year in a federal penitentiary and bragged about beating some guy up with a cue ball in his hand. He bragged about cold cocking someone from behind with a cue ball, all telling these stories in hopes of, kind of intimidating me or trying to be, project himself as a badass or something. So it was the strangest thing. And I just got out of there. I said, you know what, just know I didn't say I didn't call him names. I just said, just know I'm not doing anything illegal, Michael, because I knew if he went that far that he'd be in trouble, slander, defamation or whatever I thought he was capable of doing at that time. So I left California, and then I moved back to Denver, and I had rented out my loft. So I thought everything was behind me. And it kind of come out of this dot-com bust where I lost my first company. So I was feeling really good about myself. And then my company I learned my company was being investigated. So, that apparently someone provided an anonymous tip to another manager there that had to do with me and Christopher, my client, having an improper relationship. And so that was exactly what Michael Raines was shaking me down, for. That's the information Michael Raines had, kind of put together about me, that I had an improper relationship. Michael was an idiot. He didn't know this guy had his own company,
But he was trying to interfere and kind of trying to set you up in some strange way.
Yeah, he thought he was a full-time employee. And so, the two of us being friends was somehow, unethical or something, under the table sort of stuff. And when in reality, we both had our own companies. We both had contracts with business objects. So we're kind of like solution provider, partners. But Michael didn't understand that. He had never worked in his life. So I assumed that this anonymous tip came from Michael. I could only assume that because of what happened. But we went through the investigation, and of course, we came out of the investigation, just fine, because we had our contracts. I had great rates. Our projects were successful, and so I thought everything was behind me. And then the voices started a week after this investigation. So they were following me the whole time, and maybe they initiated it or fed information to what turned out to be a contractor who fed this anonymous tip to a manager. But they never told me anything about it. So the business objects, they never told me anything about the investigation.
The way this is all winding up is how other people are also reporting this. Basically, you had been targeted in a certain way, unbeknownst to you, right? And you started to experience a lot of stalking, and then this strange set of accusations from somebody who was your you know, the guy that you rented a place from, and who really didn't have any business being in your business at all. And then later on, it intensified, and you actually started to hear voices. In other words, voice technology, voice to skull technology, was being used against you.
Yeah, you know, those of us in this program are in a life and death situation. It is horrific what we go through on a daily basis. I cannot, you know, talk. I cannot find the words to describe how terrible it is to be, you know, being in this program. This is why Myron May, you know, created the video and said, "I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy," and then did what he did. You know, that's how deeply psychological and terrifying these programs are. So I mentioned Michael Raines because, you know, if something happens to me, he's the guy. And a lot of TIs kind of, you know, talk about people they think are involved. Well, this is a little different. You know, this is a person who shook me down for money, you know, in front of a witness. And this is information that has to be out there in the public record. So that's why I mentioned his name. So I'll continue on.
Yes, continue.
So the voice discullers at that point were making it clear to me that I was being harassed for something that I had done. That, you know, it moved beyond the neighbors playing a joke on me, and it became something a lot darker. And I described a treatment that kind of describes the sort of treatment that would take place around this time, 3 to 4 months into it. It kind of, you know, torture you with these techniques, and then you know, kind of cut, you know, make you think you're getting out, and then take away your hope all at once. Did we mention the technique? Should I just read those off really quickly?
Sure. Yeah. Take your time.
The techniques that they're using are these communist techniques that an author named Biderman kind of put together or researched and published in a book. And then Kubark CIA torture techniques, and then the Human Resources Exploitation Training Manual techniques. And then also these working group techniques that Donald Rumsfeld's lawyers put together for him when he asked, you know, for psychological and physical torture techniques that he could use in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. So this is monopolization of attention. They talk to you all the time. You're binded to their conversations all the time. The cultivation of anxiety and despair. So building up this stress that someone's going to beat you up if you go out with your friends tonight. They threatened my sister's life. They threatened my life. Right around this time, you know, back to the story quickly, they threatened my life if I did not stop working in IT consulting. Once they had done a few of these treatments and you know, started describing the clothes my sister was wearing, and describing things that were going on inside of my loft, I knew they had, you know, the sort of access that would allow them to get to me, you know, and hurt me. So, and I lived in a very secure, newly constructed building in downtown Denver. You know, card key access, you know, basement parking, you know, highly secure building, and they knew everything that was going on inside of my place. So, so I had to stop working in IT consulting. I shut down my company. So the other things they do, alternating punishments and rewards, demonstrating omnipotence and omniscience, so that they know everything about you, and that, you know, they're you know, very highly connected people. They know everything about your friends. Then you know, this is very interesting. The use of scenarios, which is right out of the Kubark manual. The use of scenarios. That's what these treatments are. Building up these scenarios, as if, you know, you're blind, and you know, they're just telling you things, you know, so that you'd believe them, you know, without you having any chance of figuring it out on your own. There's no chance that you can figure out these things unless you call everybody in this kind of nervous panic. You know, what, have you talked to somebody? You know, is somebody saying things about me? And I did that, you know, a few times to people. And they'd say, no, Chris, you know, what are you talking about? And so denial of privacy, you know, you have absolutely no privacy ever with voice to skull. They're always commenting on, you know, what you're doing at that moment. Then insults, just insults. You know, you're a loser. You're scum of the earth. You're, you know, name the insult, they've used it over and over and over. Sensory disorientation. So that's kind of you know, making you you know, in your mind, kind of think that other things are going on, making it difficult to kind of use your senses to find your, you know, to kind of figure things out for yourself. They have inserted smells before. And then emotional love, emotional hate, fear revved up harsh, fear mild, reduced fear, pride and ego up, pride and ego down, futility, you know, there's no chance you're getting out of this, Chris. Establish your identity. This is who we are, Chris. We are, you know, the most powerful organization in the world. You have no chance. We have the most powerful weapon in the world. Repetition approach, file and dossier, convincing the interrogator that he has damning or inaccurate file. That's what they did with my company. They made me think that I had done something illegal. There was something illegal that I had done that put me into this program, and I had no criminal record. So, this, you know, Mutt and Jeff. So there's a friendly and a harsh interrogator. We all have heard of these sorts of interrogation techniques: rapid fire questioning, then the sleep adjustment and sleep deprivation, you know, false flag, you know, threat of transferring you. They said for a long time, one of the common things they would kind of repeat is, Chris is on a first-class ticket. And then they'd say, well, Chris is now on a second-class ticket. And you're always wondering, you know, what does a first-class ticket mean? What does a second-class ticket mean? And so you're always, you know, explaining yourself, and they're always going back to, well, Chris is back on a first-class ticket. And, you know, after probably 4 years of them using that, along with, you know, some other kind of statements that they always went back to, that are always ambiguous, you know, you can't figure out what they mean. They said, well, that's how we're going to fly you to a black site for physical torture, you know, and imprison you. So they finally kind of revealed that's what first class and second class meant, you know. So
that's very interesting.
Prolonged, yeah. No, then there are a lot more that aren't documented, but those are, you know, some of the main ones.
Right, but in a sense, Chris, you know, you've talked before about how they are sort of throwing things at you and kind of getting you to respond, right, at different points in different ways. So it's almost like a back and forth conversation, and they're striving to get you to participate and kind of trying to map exactly where you're going when you do participate, right? They're kind of trying to delve into your memory and delve into your ways of speaking and your ways of summarizing and comprehending and so forth. And that's what they're trying to understand by throwing these little bits and pieces at you. So do you think that was part of it, the stuff about the black site?
Oh, you know, I don't know if they were going to physically drag me away, but, you know, they were using, you know, Chris has no idea what's going on with voice to skull. You know, they had a few kind of key phrases, and sorry, one's kind of just escaping me, but I'm sure I'll remember it. But they would always kind of make you think that they are on the decision to let you go is at the, you know, being considered, you know, and so whatever you're saying could either make them happy or make them angry at you. So when you're describing things, you're always keeping that in mind. You know, it's exactly like being, I would imagine, being kidnapped. is like. You know, when I read about what Gina De Jesus and Michelle Knight and Amanda Berry went through, I read, you know, about the mind games that Ariel Castro played. You know, this is just tormenting somebody. This is what they're doing. You know, I would have been nicer to you, Chris, if you didn't say that, if you didn't come across like a pompous fool, 20 minutes ago when we were talking. You know, I wouldn't have tortured you for the last 6 hours if you hadn't have told me that story about, getting in an accident in high school. You know, they know all of your high school stories, college stories, everything. And they're always making it sound as if there's something about your character that put you into voice to skull. In the beginning, it was about the law. You know, there's something about the law, but the investigation proved that I was completely innocent. So they didn't have that anymore on me. I'll kind of continue talking about these treatments. They're difficult to describe. There are some people who describe them as skits. But I think that first podcast kind of did a good job of kind of going through what these treatments are. But treatments can be combined with torture. You know, why did you, and these tortures become so much different. You know, treatments were more building up scenarios about your release when they were just voice to sculling me. Once they started using the thought interruption technologies that can literally, freeze your mind, that can take words from you when you're trying to speak, can, reflect things that you're thinking right back at you. They created a whole, another, 20 or so tortures having to do with these technologies. So treatments became, not just scenarios anymore. They became, these tortures. And why are you torturing me? Well, it always has to do with this giant program you're in. We don't like to torture you, Chris. We just do it because, we're paid to. We're professional torturers, and they always kind of demonstrate what it means to be a professional torturer. They can literally talk to you in this monotone drawl all night long and keep trying to kind of trigger you to talk back. But you have to. You don't, during the first years, 10 years, they voiced to scold me only. I would speak back like this, just with my own voice. And, you're so frustrated, you go to hell, stop talking. And, you're trying to think of things to tell them. What does this person need to hear to stop doing this? You talk of, in terms of humanity and everything you can think of, everything you've ever read, everything you could ever think of, you try to share with these people, and it's just information they use to learn more about you. But then they become these, psychological, and when I mean psychological, they're not the treatment psychological. It's how your brain is responding to their inputs. Is it going left? Is it going right? What's the decision your brain is making? It's very hard to keep your brain empty. And so they create tortures that are designed to elicit thoughts. There's a breathing torture. Every time you breathe out, they say, go to hell, Chris, or you're a jackass, Chris, or whatever they decide to say that night. But it's, you have to breathe. So they're doing that constantly. And, you can't sleep, you can't do anything. So why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And so they get you in a back and forth when you're finally just kind of going at each other.
And you're saying it's hard to ignore them. I'm hearing a bit of an echo, Chris. Do you think there's something going on with the mic, or do you think it's just people hacking into my computer? What's going on?
I don't know. I don't hear it on my end.
You're not hearing it at your end. Okay. Then it's definitely people hacking into my computer, because I've been noticing lately for the last week and a half, and I described this on the last Technogram forum. There's been a white van parked out here with Tennessee license plates ever since, Catherine exposed Randy Webster as being Millicent Black's persecutor and tormentor, and the guy who's got a $3 million contract out on her and is using BCI chips and a satellite to torment her. Well, he messes up her audio on every Technocrime podcast. And now, ever since that particular day, I've been noticing my audio is being hacked in exactly the same way, you know? And it's somewhat distracting, but more than that, it's very important, I think, for the entire world to know that this kind of hacking is going on in the middle of the podcast, you know? So,
well, I'll tell you, Romola, I noticed it when you published the first podcast that my audio was terrible, and I apologize if it's not coming through clearly now. Hopefully, when you post it, people can hear it.
I hope so.
I want them to continue.
Yours seems fine. Yours seems fine.
I want to continue telling this story to everybody because it's.
Yes.
We can talk for hours about treatments and what they are, what these tortures are, but I want to convey, what they did to me. This is what they do to other voice-to-skull victims. And as this builds and builds, you'll realize what exactly these son of a bitches are doing to human beings in these voice-to-skull programs.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to actually make a comment before I got distracted by the audio issue. I'm sorry, Chris. So the thing I wanted to say was this is actually torture. This is nothing but clean and definite torture. And in fact, these guys who are sitting around doing this to you are telling you that this is torture. They're telling you that they are professional torturers. They're sadistic XYZs, and they're going into it with gusto. They're happy to do it, or they project an air of complete complacency about what they are doing to you, right? And when you look at what they're doing, it's totally connected to what's spelled out in the Kubark manual, in the CIA torture manuals. So this is what I wanted to stress, that this is nothing but CIA torture, the same torture techniques that Rumsfeld got, Rumsfeld's working group got. From who? From the lawyers? Or the lawyers got it for him?
Yeah, the lawyers got it for him, put it together for him.
Right. So this is classic military intelligence, historically documented torture techniques. Things like monopolizing your attention. It's like throwing you into solitary and just sort of hitting you nonstop with their horrific streams of talk that are both commentary on what you were doing, plus all sorts of other kinds of insulting kind of conversation that goes on.
Oh, and you're binded. I always use the term binded because, you are, it's not a conversation that in the back seat of your car that you can tune out. You are concentrating on it. You can't stop but listen to it. I mean, you can't stop it. So, for instance, if you're, I lived in downtown Denver and we have light rail. And when after a fresh snowfall, the light rail tracks can become kind of covered. And I was walking one day in downtown Denver in the morning, and they were talking like always, and I was so distracted that I felt this huge gust of wind, and it was the light rail brushed my shoulder. I was standing an inch from the light rail tracks and didn't even know it. I was just, listening to the talk just endlessly. That's the way it is. You're just stuck to it. You're binded to it like this. And then another time, I'm driving. And they do always do it when you're driving. You have to be so careful when you're driving, when they're voice-to-skulling you. But, I've pulled out into intersections, on a red light. Because I just wasn't paying attention. So it's, this is the stuff that they're doing. And I used to have a motorcycle, and you can imagine how dangerous something like this is when you're doing anything. I mean, when you're operating any sort of motor vehicle. I mean, it's terrifying to kind of be stuck in this program and knowing that these are just the daily things you deal with. I can't go out into traffic. I have to think, always concentrate on exactly what I'm doing,
I also wanted I just wanted to mention as well, or underline really, that not only is it basic torture from these classic manuals, these classic torture manuals, as you point out, it's extremely hazardous, and they don't care. I mean, these guys are psychopaths, right? I mean, they don't really care what they're putting you through. They're simply taking over your brain and forcing you into these incredible situations, binded situations, as you say, where you're kind of enthralled to what they are saying, and you're kind of caught up constantly inside their horrific little circles of conversation and thought that they're striving to put you into or draw
Yeah.
you into. So, and you also mentioned, therefore, that in a sense, this is, it keeps you from being yourself. It keeps you from becoming yourself. It takes your personality away from you. It steals your personality. It steals your life away from you. It's kind of a degrading of your personality because it's such a takeover of your internal self and your internal brain.
So, Romola, I was, voted the class clown of my senior class. I had 500 people in my senior class. I was talkative and funny and, would always just think of funny things to say. That's what my brain would do naturally, They took that all away from me. I have no long-term memory. I can only remember a few things from my childhood. I can't read without having to highlight everything. And I forget about, the sentence I read, the one before I'm actually on. This book from Shane O'Mara that I mentioned in the first podcast, about the neuroscience of interrogation, torture, it proves, it explains how torture degrades your memories. And so these are, definitely break the US's interpretation of the Convention Against Torture. It's meant to be long-term, intended to be long-term, and to cause permanent damage. And so, there's no doubt, and what's difficult for me to describe in this video is how, where does that Dr. Ishii, Joseph Mengele, personality come from? Where, what goes into the making of a torture? They're psychopaths who are picked out of prisons. They always claim to be scientists or researchers, and that's just a cover.
That's just a cover. I was going to say precisely that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because they never talk. They never use scientific jargon. They never refer to any of these, these technologies the way Robert Duncan or somebody can describe them. So you're binded to these stories that are just constantly unwinding on a daily basis, but you don't even care what they are. You wake up the next morning, you've forgotten what the details are of this stupid story that they're, the scenario they're trying to build up, and then they remind you of it. Well, this is what's happening, Chris. We talked to your friend Jay, and he says he wants to go public, but you have your mutual friend Damien doesn't want him to, so we're still kind of wondering, how, if you're going to get let out, or how this might affect you. You're probably going to be stuck in this a lot longer than you want to, than you'd like to be. No one's coming up, no one's coming forward to help you. You're just okay. You're doing other things. It's not inner speech. It's not a running commentary. It's not a narrative of what's going on about you. It's not forward bursts. Get out of here, or you're a jerk, or stop looking at me. It's nothing like that. So that's what I want to really try to convey.
I think you have. I think you've successfully conveyed that this is much more intense and torturous than people could even begin to imagine. It's not just like a record player going on and on playing the same song or whatever. It's much worse than that. It's continuous. It's loud. It's raucous. It's extremely invasive. It's classically torturous in terms of isolating you, monopolizing your attention, taking over, repeating things, bringing
in the torture cell. The cell you're in are these voices. You're in a prison cell. And so what are they talking about? How are you going to be released? You know, when are they going to decide to release you? You are kidnapped. It's a kidnapping. And they are continually, you know, pushing you, threatening your life, threaten my life if I didn't shut down a company that had made me, you know, more than $500,000 in a year and a couple months after I founded it, Watermill. You know, I had loft payment. I had all kinds of, you know, you know, I had a great, you know, kind of portfolio. I was trading in the market, and they took it all away from me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're threatened with death, you know, there's nothing you can do. When Voice to Skull says, you know, it's nice that you know, I like your dresses, or your excuse me, I like your daughter's dress today. I like the blue stripes and the socks she has, and the black shoes she's wearing, and the bow in her hair, the yellow bow in her hair. I mean, when Voice to Skull says something like that to you about your family or your sister or somebody you know, you will, you know, change your testimony. You will move out of the country. You will quit your job. You'll do whatever they tell you to do. That is what this is about. That's what they're doing. When this was going on, they threatened me. I was thinking about my business partners. I was thinking about, you know, I have to quit this because what are they going to do if I stay in IT consulting? You know, they could harm one of my friends, one of my business partners, you know, one of my clients, one of my contractors, you know. And later through, you know, as we continue with this, there are four actually unexplained deaths related to my Voice to Skull. 2 of which occurred, you know, 3 days after Voice to Skull mentioned these individuals, you know, in one of these treatment sessions. One happened 2 days after they mentioned this individual, and then the second one happened about 4 days after they spent an hour imitating this person's voice to me on Voice to Skull. He died of an aneurysm 4 days later. So this is what we're facing. I mean, this is, what do you do when your life is threatened like this? So Voice to Skull, when this happened, a friend of mine who was working for me at Watermill, I was teaching him how to become a recruiter. He came over. He was one of my childhood best friends. So I said, Chris, you know, Jason, can you hear these voices? And he said, no, I can't. I said, well, listen really hard. But you know, I thought that he knew me well enough. You know, I was successful. We were best friends. You know, I've always been stable. Both of us are, you know, pretty stable people. And you know, it's kind of like the guy who would fight for you. You know, that kind of guy, the guy you trust to kind of stand up for you. He said, no, I couldn't hear him. And the voices, and I kind of talked back to the voices. This was in the first month or so. And I said, you know, stop trying to scare me. You know, you're not ghosts, okay? Stop trying to, you know, because they were going, ooh, Chris, you know, we're, you know, looking at you through the walls or something, and you know, something goofy. And so my friend kind of looked at me, and then he excused himself. He said, you know, I have to go. And he said he had to call his wife. So he came back. He went outside. This was about, you know, 10:30, 11 at night. He called the police, brought them back to my house, and had me forcibly removed from my house for talking back to the voices like this. Come on, you're not spirits. Go to hell. Go, you know, screw yourselves.
So
whatever I said back.
We talked about this in the print interview, and it's absolutely shocking to me, and probably is to everybody watching this. I mean, this was a very good friend of yours, and the first thing that he did was he called the police on you, and that's the ultimate betrayal, right? Ultimate
betrayal. So after that happened, you know, I just told the people at the hospital where they took me, you know, Jason drove me there. They didn't, you know, arrest me or anything. That I was just hearing my neighbors, but they didn't buy it. But Jason, what happened that really hurt me is that he told my family about this. And that kind of cut my Achilles when it came to, you know, really, you know, being a person who has a strong career and all of this stuff, you know, coming out against an electromagnetic weapon like this, you know, it just cuts your Achilles because they start talking And
Mm-hmm.
so my sister came about a week later, and she suggested a psychologist or a psychiatrist for me to go speak with. And I said, absolutely no, absolutely not. I'm not going to do this. I'm hearing living, breathing people talking to me. And then she said, Chris, you're just, you're making me upset. And I said, well, it's my decision. I don't have to go. And then voiced this call, cut in and said, Chris, if you don't see the psychiatrist, your sister's psychiatrist, then we're going to kill your sister. When she goes back to her car, which is parked on the second, B2 parking level of your building with her dog, Bella. So that's what they said. We're going to kill Laurel and her dog, Bella, when she goes when she goes downstairs to leave parking level B2 in your building. And my sister was there with her dog, Bella, and she had parked on B2. So I said, okay, Laurel, I'll go see the psychiatrist. And so that's it. I was stuck. And then after meeting the psychiatrist,
Mm-hmm.
and who I just, I said, I'm not hearing voices in my head. I think it's my neighbors talking, because at this point, what's going on. They're setting you up.
Right.
They've done it twice now, in a 1 week span. So I just said, look, I don't have to, it's my right to not see you again. I think it was my neighbors. She, prescribed me some medication, Amplify, and I didn't take it.
Did she say something like, did she say, oh, this is anxiety and you need to calm down and they're going to give you a little sedative type medication?
No, she said, it sounds like you might be bipolar.
Oh my.
She says, I suspect you're bipolar.
Even worse.
No history of mental illness, no diagnostic workup. I mean, nothing. And
let's pause there actually for a minute, because psychiatry is a big, big subject here in relation to voice-to-skull technology and in relation to targeting of every kind. So most psychiatrists, the people who are targeted go to, end up prescribing antipsychotics and end up diagnosing them as schizoid or schizophrenic and as you say, possibly bipolar as well. However, they do not at any point make any attempt whatsoever to research military technology or to look into the whole phenomenon of voices in heads being anything other than related to schizophrenia, right?
Well, I'm amazed that the Cuban diplomats and Canadian diplomats were able to convey their symptoms to people who took them seriously. I think it's only because they were diplomats that the United States knows about these programs and these weapons, that the military doctors, took their complaints seriously. They're describing the same things that we're describing, the same exact thing: pains and nausea and gangstalking and forgetting words and headaches, all of these things. So, why we're hearing metallic, voices and sort of sounds, buzzing in their head. These are the things people complain about all the time, and we're called delusional, or we're called, schizophrenic.
Mm-hmm.
So, in my story, it continues, and my dad actually played a really kind of, I know he cares about me, but he played kind of a dirty trick on me a number of years later, and I can talk to you, I can kind of discuss that. But I went public after one of these people passed away 3 days after being mentioned on Voice to Skull.
Mm-hmm.
This woman passed away 2 days after being mentioned on Voice to Skull. Her name's Karen Quintana.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to leave the country and try to go public about this, learn as much as I could about it and write. Yeah. And so when I posted what happened on Facebook, I just came out and said, I've been gang stalked, and these people have been talking to me nonstop. They had already introduced some biorobotization and a little bit of forced speech there. So it was already just something that, is just incredible. And when I was so confident when I went out there, I said, this feels really good. I'm coming out with this. Because of what Jason, my friend in Denver had done, and talked to my parents about me speaking back to the voices that night, everybody assumed that, it was related to that issue. Everybody. So it wasn't this big coming out. It just became this, oh, Chris, Chris's mental illness came back, and Ramona, I had spent 7 years after they threatened my life. If I didn't close my IT consulting business, I got into charity fundraising. I started 3 companies. The second one I was kind of recruited into by an individual who worked for one of my clients in the first fundraising company. So the first one was an online pet store, and it allowed people to shop 5,000 pet products and donate a percentage of the profit, our company's profit, to a charity, one of 200 charities. Your school could sign up for it. Your charity could sign up for it. We'd build you your own website. It'd have your school logo on the top of it, and it would be your own, charity fundraising site for your 501c3 or your school. So it had a white label aspect to it, and then it had a one main site where you could just shop and pick a charity from a list. So it was a big endeavor, and I did it to try to wave the white flag, to try to I was told I couldn't work in IT staffing, so I said, okay, well then I'm going to start another company, and that's how I'm going to get back at you. And I'm going to do it in charity fundraising. So you're going to have to explain to your superiors, why you're torturing somebody who's working with some of, well-known charities, Goodwill, American Humane. These were all close partners of ours in this company. And that my thought was someone in the chain of command would have to explain why they're torturing Chris, and so I continued with this to build up my credibility, to be public, to be out there. Some of our representatives were on, and interviewed on TV for these fundraising events and things. And so I felt like, okay, I'm really, giving it back to them. But then the recession came in 2008, and it became really hard to raise money. And so at this point, I've started a second company with some partners, and it was an expo for underprivileged kids from the inner city, a college expo, college and career expo. We had for-profit schools and state schools represented under the same roof. So that's something I worked on for 8 months or so. And then I started a third company, which was 50-50 partners with the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association. It was a daily deal site, like a Groupon for pets. And so I always stuck with this, fundraising. I'm always, I'm in fundraising. I'm always working with these charities because I always thought I could go public, and my relationships with these executive directors from these charities, and would kind of support me if I could come out with this. I'd have a lot of really important people in the humanitarian kind of world, who are strong humanitarians. Let me put it that way, who would come to my defense, who had worked with me for 7 years and knew that I was perfectly healthy, the whole time. And so I did it for a few different reasons, but at the time, that's the only thing I could really think of doing, was to stick with charities, stick with charities, stick with charities.
In a sense, they had also put over this idea on you that you kind of deserved what was being done to you, and that you were in this program for a reason, that this was all part of the whole, I don't know, the surveillance scenario at the time. I mean, what year was this? Was this after 9/11?
Yes. This started in 2005.
Okay.
Started in 2005, kind of halfway, probably July or so, August or time frame of 2005, and then I started the fundraising companies in 2006. Okay. So they immediately took me out of IT. Yep. So you're right. What you said before is exactly right.
It's a false narrative that they projected over to you, a kind of shifting of blame or projection of blame, really. Trying to make you feel in some way culpable. In addition to the torture, you were being given this story that you had brought it on yourself. So this is sort of a
Yes.
classic case of victimizing the victim.
Yeah. That's exactly the way it is. Exactly what they
That's
did.
really shocking.
What do you do in that situation? I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
I regret doing that now because it was during the recession. I poured all my money into it. You're thinking at the time that, if I added, one more school to the website, if I, created one more relationship, that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and torture will stop, and it never happens. It never happens. They just continue torturing you all the way through it. I mean, they're that insulated.
Yes, and
everything.
I think the analogy you used earlier is a brilliant one of being kidnapped. In a sense, you were as kidnapped and abducted into a basement cellar, just like those 3 girls that Ariel Castro kidnapped and held in his cellar. It's a different kind of abduction and kidnapping because it's the abduction and kidnapping of your brain, and it's a refusal to let go, despite whatever you try to do.
Yep, refusal to let go. That's what they torture you with constantly. Why we're not letting you go, Chris? You don't have any chance. Why aren't you letting me go? Why are you doing this? How did you become involved in this? And we have talked for so many hours about it, and they just don't care. That's what they say most of the time in response to those kinds of questions. We just don't care, Chris. We just don't care. But nobody else cares either. They are so insulated. These programs, it makes no sense to me how the United States allowed something like this to become what it is today, voice to skull. It's a kill fest, for sexual gratification. And this technology has all been developed. I don't think it has anything to do with the development of the technology. I think they're working on the kind of imperceptible takeovers and that sort of thing, which we'll talk about later. But but what they could do to me was all available. They were using these advantages against me. I thought I was being hacked. They were commenting on things that were in my loft. I thought I had cameras in my loft. I thought my neighbors were involved. They were all, later you find out, oh my gosh, they can look through your eyes. They can hear what you're hearing. So they don't need any bugs. They don't need any hacking, although they do a lot of hacking too.
And, at some point, I hope we can speak more in a more focused and more detailed way about things like that, because, there are many people who hear that particular line of they can see through your eyes and hear what you're hearing and think that these are the ravings of, delusional lunatics, not realizing that there is brain technology today that can actually do that. And, everything that you are describing is something that is being done to you remotely. And this is another big fallacy that's being promulgated in the mainstream media, that you need wires in your brain at this point still, to look into a person's head or to do an EEG or whatever. But in fact, in actuality, the patterns exist, and all of your experiences point to the fact that the technology now exists, definitely in the Black Ops world and the Covert Ops world, where this is all happening, for complete neuro invasion, complete neuro taking out of information and putting in of information, right?
Yep. And to cause physical damage, all you need to do is read about Cuba, and understand what, how deep America is in this mess that they created for the rest of the world. America is very good at that, creating messes for the rest of the world. And in this case, U.S. officials are denying the existence of weapons like this. They're actually coming out and saying it doesn't make any sense. The physics don't add up. These are U.S. officials, who are coming out and saying these things.
They're lying to as we know.
Well, we know we know what the symptoms are. We know people have described them as walking into a field where they can hear, crickets, scraping sounds and the sounds of crickets, and then step out and it's different. Headaches, and then the inability to think of words. and then what they're calling brain damage, which nobody has really investigated. What does this brain damage mean? Listen to what I'm describing as my brain damage. Memory loss, problems finding words, inability to spell, to do simple math problems. I was a very good student and had, practically straight A's, and I was a finance major in college, and I can't do simple math problems. They can, prohibit you from accessing your, parts of your cerebral cortex that are involved in that sort of thinking. You're stuck in this kind of language center. It's disgusting that America would come out and say this stuff they don't know what it is. And it's terrible for people like us in these torture treatments, because the torturers take advantage of that. You're never being released. Nobody's talking about it. It's terrible to think about, the collusion involved, and it's just depressing. So we can talk about that later. I'd love to continue talking about the story.
I'm glad you brought it up, though. I'm glad you brought it up, because that's the issue of deception that we are faced with here. And I can't stop talking about how mainstream media is pulling such a big one over everybody's eyes and everybody, in the whole world, with their failure to describe reality as we are experiencing it, all of us on the planet, and their readiness to skew and distort the truth and the reality of what's going on in the world today. And indefinitely with this issue, when many, many hundreds and thousands of people are stepping forward in every country on the earth to report neuro-assault and neuro-modification and neuro-attack, it's absolutely unpardonable. It's horrifying. It's grotesque that media is not touching it and not presenting it in the correct terms, as related to military and intelligence covert ops that are going on. Surveillance that is trespassed into human experimentation non-consensually, and the most horrific experimentation that simply goes into the realm of MK Ultra. So it's horrific. So as far as media goes, yes, they're engaging in mass deception, but as you point out as well, these officials, so-called officials from the CIA and the FBI, who are quoted in the stories in The Guardian and so forth, who come out and say, oh, it's such a mystery, the mystery is deepening further and further, and we have no idea what, is going on. That is not just deception. It is, I can't even find the words for it. I'm sure there are legal words for what that is. It's well beyond deception. It is the absolute desire to pull the wool over people's eyes, to keep these programs undercover, and to not ever reveal them, never in any way implicate themselves. And I think that's what's going on. They are trying hard to cover it so that they can't be blamed. And, we are here with these podcasts to show that they are most definitely responsible. These are the CIA MK Ultra programs of the modern day. They went underground, they continued underground, they expanded underground, and they're back again. And they're not so underground. We're putting them above ground for the whole world to see.
Well, the patents and some of these papers, bioeffects of lethal weapons, that are talking about voice to skull. I mean, the information's out there. Nausea-inducing transmitter, sonic devices you can buy on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
This stuff is out there, and so it's difficult when you describe what I'm describing. With the treatments that started as mirrored conversations, then turned into direct conversations. The description of the treatments themselves, these intricate stories that they're like radio shows that just continue to be built up. They're outside of your mind. You're not, it's as if a team of writers are coming up with this stuff. Every few days, they're submitting new, plot lines for this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with the protocols they're following, the personal traits, that are just what make people human. What are those things that make people human that you think about when you're on a phone call? It's the same stuff that's in voice to skull, but you put this stuff together, and then with this gradual revealing of the technology, which a lot of victims are describing the same way I am. the thought insertion, then the biorobotization and the forced speech, and in mine are so over the top. The examples are so over the top. I would park my car in my hand. What do people think about when a person like me tells a story like this, that I'm just making it up? I gave up my multi-million-dollar in my career in IT staffing and consulting to do this. I gave up my loft in Denver. I mean, I gave up my life to go talk about this stuff that it's hard to even describe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do people think about when you describe having your body taken over, people speaking through you, and we're all saying the same thing, the voices, the treatments, it all adds up. And in America, we're in this program, and and we're all, our torturers have us because they know we're never being released. It's always a decision to kill yourself or be tortured, and it's dangerous because a lot of TIs, a lot of voices called TIs and other TIs have killed themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, there's no, like you said, there's no acknowledgement from the U.S. officials that there's a program. I don't know of any released TIs. The skits are so psychopathic, that, the people involved are extremely dangerous. And then the history of experimentation in the U.S. proves that, these programs are never revealed. They're never revealed unless someone, whistle blows. So it doesn't look good for victims like us, and the torturers.
Well, let's hope, Chris, that this is the start of a new day, and that the horrific things that MK Ultra has done in the past, which are being surpassed by what it's doing in the present, are indeed going to be revealed in their full and bitter goriness by people who have the humanity to step forward. And indeed, we do need whistleblowers. We desperately need whistleblowers from inside these programs. Now, it's very hard to imagine, I would imagine, because it seems like these torturers who are working, with this particular technology, they're sitting around doing this mind hiving and, mind cloning and getting in. They're working together in teams. They're being paid fat sums of money to do what they're doing. And they've all signed these NDAs, I'm sure, non-disclosure orders, because I'm sure this is all considered above top secret and special access and all these high funder names, which make them feel very special. But in actuality, what they are really doing is destroying people. They're destroying human beings. They're destroying human brains. They're sitting around taking pleasure from being sadistic. So for that reason, and I think you've been very eloquent in terms of spelling out how America needs to wake up and see what's going on and see the extreme cost here, the very high price being paid by those being targeted. People are dying. People are in extremely dire straits. People are extremely distraught about this, and they are killing themselves. This is about a suicide program.
And Romola, it's so overt. When you hear stories like mine, you can describe it. You can share the story, and you can tell people, look what happened to this person. Describe the voices, describe the treatments, the personality traits, and then the forced speech, and then the hand, the biorobotization. And this is just the beginning. They took me over as a Manchurian candidate. I about this, but the viewers probably don't. One day at a bus stop, they sent someone over to me. I was sitting there during a rainstorm in East Palo Alto, near a convenience store where I went to get a bag of chips and a drink. And this guy walked up to me and Voice to Skull started describing him and saying, "Oh, that's Greg. Yeah, he's, we know everybody here." And he started laughing. And he said, "Oh, Greg, Greg's an idiot," and he started laughing again. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is going on? And he sat down, and Greg and I had met each other a week or two before at the same bus stop. And so somehow, and he had told me he was on parole. And so we just kind of sat there for 10 minutes together. And between the time I met him the first time and the second time, Voice to Skull somehow got in touch with him, or he was sent, in the first place. But what happened the second time was amazing, because he started laughing at what Voice to Skull was saying, and Voice to Skull said, "Chris, this is Greg, because I didn't catch his name the first time, and we know him, we know everybody around, where we know a lot of people. You have no idea how deep we go." And then Greg was laughing, chuckling, he was chuckling for no reason. He was alone, and he was chuckling if the same things Voice to Skull was telling me. So he sat down, and I looked at his shirt, and he was wearing a gray sweatshirt, and it said the Manchurian Candidate Project on his sweatshirt. And I could not believe it. At the time, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to end, because they kept telling me it's going to end. It's going to end. The president's in Palo Alto. He wants to meet with you. That's what they were telling me at the time. So I thought, oh my gosh, and I'm going to see Greg at some event, in a week or two. So, and I didn't have my cell phone with me, so I couldn't take a picture, but I could describe him. He looks like Michael Irvin. I could probably pick him out of a lineup or a mugshot, but pick out his mugshot. So, this is the stuff that you can use to describe to people. Look at this story, and then he pulled over his car, his body parts are being shaken, and then people start talking out of him. How could anybody listen to these stories and then think that it's all being made up in our minds? This is what's so hard for us to deal with, because our families are so brainwashed into believing what, in my case, my dad would rather listen to a nurse practitioner than what I'm saying. Well, Chris, there are things that could explain that. There are mental illnesses that could explain that. Really, Dad? Which ones are they? We're at the point where show me some evidence. Show me some evidence, because people are dying. My parents have no idea how much torture I deal with on a daily basis. And the TIs we're all in the same boat. But, again, I hope through this conversation, and if we can continue it, people can kind of hear the story, so they can regurgitate it, and they can say it quickly and say, look at this example.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And Chris, the whole purpose of doing this and having these conversations is to shut these programs down, to bring them out into the light of day, and to force their termination and force their closure. And people may think this is sort of a pie in the sky kind of dream, given the horrific nature of the CIA and what they've been doing for decades. And I'm aware how horrific these black ops and covert ops are, that the CIA and DIA have been doing for ages. But somebody has got to pull the plug on that. Somebody's got to say, this is BS. We've got to stop it. And the reason that, at this point, this is not even pure journalism anymore. This is activism. It's journalism plus activism, because there's nobody covering this. Media won't touch it. Human rights groups won't touch it. You've got psychiatrists lying up their wazoo. And, I want to say a word about psychiatry as well. So what's going on currently is you've got the DSM, and I think there are many psychiatrists, actually, the smarter ones, who are perfectly aware that the DSM is complete nonsense, that a bunch of people, a bunch of old guys are sitting around calling themselves psychiatrists, really, and they're working for the state, they're working for the bankers who are running the state, and they are inventing disorders by the dozen. They're giving them names, they're giving them fancy names, and they're throwing them into the DSM. And then that is handed out like a textbook to every new psychiatric resident, who goes through the program, who becomes a doctor and then becomes a psychiatrist. It's the Bible of psychiatry. And because that is the case, these new doctors, these new psychiatrists who come on the scene, just use the DSM and completely diagnose people based on the DSM. And all it started with was a bunch of old guys sitting around in a room and deciding to do this. It's all by consensus of a group of so-called psychiatrists, so-called, intellectuals working together and coming up with those descriptions. So it's bogus right from the start. Start to finish, it's bogus. And the second thing that the DSM has done is, particularly with something like schizophrenia, I think they have something called the functional schizophrenic. So this is a very, very clever ruse on the part of the state-sponsored psychiatrist. It's insidious, you see, because it allows them to pronounce a diagnosis, To call somebody schizophrenic or schizoid or divorced from reality, when they mention these military technologies, taking over their brains, you're divorced from reality, you're schizoid, you're schizophrenic. Oh, but I see you can get up in the morning and you can brush your teeth and you can make breakfast and send the kids off to school. You're a functional schizophrenic, and that's also taken care of in the DSM. So you see, it's so insidious what they're doing.
Well, I mean, look at what, delusions. You have to have two positive symptoms to be called, schizophrenic right now in the DSM-5. I think it's the same way the DSM-4, but I believe the DSM-5 as well. Delusions and hallucinations. That's enough to take, a person like myself or anyone who's suffering from this stuff and diagnose them with schizophrenia, which is a serious, mental illness. There's a title for it, a serious mental illness. And so delusions, you have to kind of understand the definition of a delusion. It has to do with something that is understood but not, there's a possibility of it existing, but it's not widely believed. It's basically that. And so you look at these attacks in Cuba, and you look at the existence of these weapons, and then we're all being called delusional because the doctors don't believe in the existence of these weapons. And so and who would be responsible for the use, the management of weapons like this? It would be an organization like the CIA. So they immediately say, well, he's talking about the CIA. It's like that movie, The Perfect Mind. And you just think, we're in the age of these silent weapons, these covert weapons. We understand what stealth, no-touch torture is. We have so many examples and patents of technology, that do the same sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But nobody, in the medical community understands it. And I did a lot of research when I moved to Cambodia and read about the APA, the American Psychological Association, and if you read their code of ethics, they changed it a couple of years ago, but their goals were always, titled as aspirational. And they're the largest psychologists, or the military is the largest employer of psychologists in the world. And so, you see the connection there. We all know about what, the torture. There are people like Brad Olson who speak a lot, APA members who speak up against the organization. Mm-hmm. But they had this PENS task force made up of military psychologists that mm-hmm. that basically dictated the policies of the APA with regard to psychologist participation in torture. Mm-hmm. So anyway, very difficult, to kind of be, a good person, pay their taxes, all of those things, and have your country turn your back on you to this extent, mm-hmm. Where you cannot complain about an electromagnetic weapon. So yes, and remote. Forgive me for talking too much about this stuff.
It's okay. I think you're entitled to speak your mind, considering what's been done to you, Chris. And in fact, you bring up things that I definitely would like to underline and point out to people. The fact that in this age of advanced neuroscience, no psychiatrist worth his or her education has the right to be uninformed about neuroscience and what neuroscience is capable of, what the science today can do. I think there are neuroscientists, not even who in the military world, not even in the covert or black ops world, who have come forward and who have understood now that brains can be influenced, that almost any aspect of the human brain can be influenced. There are some neuroscientists who have actually spoken out about it. Vincent Walsh comes to mind. James Giordano has given, lots of lectures about it. I mean, right now, James Giordano is talking about, neuroscience programs of the Department of Justice, pre-crime programs, where they're talking about predictive policing and really scanning brains, reading minds, and reading thoughts in order to determine criminality, so to speak. So that's one aspect of it, but that's already being talked about. A psychiatrist should know about that stuff.
Well, it's amazing to me that you can talk about thought reading, programs that are out there. Facebook's, program, to use your thoughts to type, and what Elon Musk is doing, and these helmets that allow soldiers to fly airplanes. There's so much information, and you think, well, if it's reading information from the brain, and it's also projecting that information into the brain, and people can't understand that. Well, somehow it's possible if you put a skull cap on, you put an electrode on, but it's not possible to do it from this far away or from a mile away. When we have cell phone, I mean, with all, with everything going on with wireless communication, it's just amazing, this brain block that people have.
Yes, there's a couple other things there, and I think we should mention them too as well, actually, Chris. The brain block that you're talking about, I mean, because we know that minds can be remotely influenced and minds can be remotely read, we should also understand that mind control technology, which has historically been developed, again, through the Black Ops world, has also progressed to the point where just the pumping in of certain frequencies can actually control the brain. So in other words, people's emotions could be changed in that way. People's emotions could be modified. People's disbelief or belief centers, their trust centers, could be messed with by just sending in frequencies. And I suspect that is what is being done, because if those torture manuals, in fact, do describe it, in some other military documents, where the whole program of psychological warfare that the military is running, of course, on everybody, although everybody doesn't know it, has to do and connects with this notion of cognitive containment, or controlling people's environments, And most Americans know that in this country in particular, we've all been brainwashed for decades through the television and through the radio, right? So this is just one more example of that. So people are indeed being brainwashed. People are being mind controlled. They just don't know it. The information is actually there, and the patterns are there, And who's to say that your family members and my family members and almost everybody who's targeted, their families, are not being messed with just in order to fulfill that, that particular factor of the military PSYOP program, which is cognitive containment, trying to keep the story from getting out. And this is why, with mainstream media, the CIA has direct control. They've got their agents in media to tell their stories and propagandize for them. They don't have that much control over alternative media, but even now, alternative media has been so taken over. There's pseudo-alternative media at this point in time.
Well, one of the things I'm hearing now is that, it's hard to believe because that television show about Here Comes Saul, or what's his name? It's a character from the show Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul.
Okay.
And so this is a popular show on HBO, I guess, and it talks. And the main character's brother, believed he was hearing people talking to him, and to the extent that he wore a tinfoil hat, and so this is the kind of stuff you get in response. Well, the TV show I was watching portrayed, the same thing you're talking about, and it went away for him. I guess in the show it just kind of, the character.
Yeah, well, yes, you see, so that's what they're doing as well. They're trying to encourage people to believe that this is something that can, the tinfoil hats, those hat wearers, those conspiracy theorists, yes.
Well, you have Dr. Horton, who's a high energy physicist, an Oxford PhD, who probably knows more than the advisor who, the person who advised, the scientific advisor on the television show, knows more than the directors and the writers about physics. And she's a victim being tortured, and has a video of a shot being captured on her website, a video of an actual electromagnetic shot moving the tinfoil, on her website. So, I mean, and a person would rather point out, this character on Better Call Saul, is more credible than than a high energy physicist from CERN who's going through this. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. It's people, they'd rather be doing something else, they want a quick answer for you. And so, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to communicate.
It is difficult. And as far as electromagnetic weapons go and the so-called non-lethal weapons, there's plenty of information about that as well. But again, you have the local doctor, the local psychiatrist, and the average educated professional who reads the lies in the New York Times or the Washington Post is totally brainwashed and imagines that these things are happening elsewhere on a different plane. The military experimentation may have happened to other people, but cannot be happening to us and our family, etc. So this goes on, this is what's going on. But I think the really educated people, the really aware intellectuals, are perfectly aware that not merely is this possible, that the military is once again engaging in non-consensual weapons testing and non-consensual experimentation, and the intelligence agencies, but that it is happening. So I think, that's where I rest my hope and my optimism, that there are people out there who are smarter than the brainwashed masses, and everybody is being brainwashed. Everybody is being mind controlled. But my hope is there are people out there who are a bit smarter, and I've got this tagline, a little bit smarter than the CIA or a little bit smarter than the DIA. I hope those people exist. I hope, because I count myself in that group of people who are smarter than the CIA, people who are smarter than the DIA, because what's coming forward now through victim testimonials is reports of such extreme torture that, the whole world must indeed pay attention. The whole world must indeed listen. We've come to a point in history where we cannot sweep things under the rug. We cannot, like the Church Committee did in the 1970s, let the CIA and the DIA go scot-free. Oh no. The time of reckoning, I believe, has come, because at this point, the entire species is in danger of being taken over in many, many ways. I mean, there's so many horrific things going on. The transhumanism, the nanobots raining down from the sky, vaccines causing autism, etc. So much going on. And this, there's 5G, there's Wi-Fi creating cancers, etc. There's a lot. But this is about the human brain. The human brain is extremely susceptible to attack, is currently under attack, and it's being especially attacked in this group that people are calling targeted individuals, but who are really just fabulous, wonderful people who have been abducted into these predatorial programs being run by these black ops agencies. And it's time for the world to wake up and realize this is about biorobotization. It's about neurohacking. It's about taking over the human brain, the human will, the human intention, and the human ability to function at all, and human personality. It's about the takeover of the human personality. So this is the point at which we are literally on the edge of a precipice. If people watching this do not wake up, I don't know what's going to wake them up. So my hope is that this reaches those people out there who are very concerned for humanity, who are smart, who are intellectual, and who are definitely smarter than the CIA and the DIA, and will step forward and do something. And I also hope, Chris, that this will incite whistleblowers from inside the ranks, to step forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we have to reach out to the intellectuals, academia, and not be as concerned with having to change the minds of the public. That's a big job. We need those other individuals, those other groups to help us do that. So when you watch a video like this, share it. Listen to what I'm saying. And be able to kind of explain it in terms that you can convey in a minute, or in 5 minutes, in a 5-minute conversation. Mm-hmm. That's what I think the purpose of these videos are, because I have to be honest with you. I'm not confident that I'm going to make it through this program. As we continue our conversation, or at least if people read my written interview, this got a lot worse for me. they put me in the hospital for a month. I had to be airlifted to a hospital
Yes, Chris.
because of something they did when they took me over.
Yeah, Chris,
So,
you know, I had actually hoped that we would talk about all of that today, but it seems like we've really gone more into detail into the program itself, which is good because we needed to put that out there as well. And, you know, we've just sort of shared our own thinking about this, and that's good as well because people need to hear what's going on, you know, at this close level and what people are thinking about it. So we're sort of almost at the 2 hour mark at this point. You know, I think our conversation kind of spilled over and we weren't noticing it, and I didn't really know how to stop it, and I didn't want to really because, you know, it was so important, everything that you're talking about. So what I'm hoping, however, Chris, is that we still do go back and hear your whole story, and maybe the next time, because we've kind of let off steam over here and, you know, shared our thinking over here, maybe the next podcast we can just focus on the arc of your story. What do you think?
yeah. You know, I appreciate it. It's you know, I think if you listen to it, you can kind of, you know, understand what the programs are about. It's so difficult for victims to talk. I want to make sure people understand that. You know, they are running nonstop mind tech experiments on us, and our brains have deteriorated. I mean, they are doing this non-consensually for a reason. You know, they are dumping our bodies when they're finished with us, and it's very clear that these experiments are not going to end well for us. You know, I know, you know, I'm a Manchurian candidate, and if people, you know, can't wake up to the fact that there's a person out there who is being turned into a Manchurian candidate who's out there on the internet talking about it, then what else do they need to see? You know, these programs are dangerous, and this is a testimony that, you know, might, you know, end up being the only way in which I am able to reach out to people. You know, I have a YouTube video out there, but, you know, I talk to voice to skull victims, you know, all the time who are contemplating suicide, and we talk about it with each other. And so, you know, there aren't going to be people like me around very much longer. So if people who are interested in really getting the facts and diving into the descriptions of these treatments and protocols, and, you know, the how these tortures communicate, and then this progression of the technologies we haven't even talked about. I mean, the biorobotization, but what is biorobotization? It's a gradual revealing. For me, it started with them, you know, spinning a fork, but then it moves to these treatments where, you know, you know, they have someone inside of you whose voice is a woman's, you know, who in my case, they built up to be this woman I used to work with. And so, you know, these are elaborate treatments that, you know, include this technology as if, you know, everyone's kind of accepted it already. There's this inner circle of CEOs and celebrities who have accepted this technology and already use it on a daily basis. You know, this is what it can do. This is what it would look like if Facebook used it. This is the stuff that we can talk about next time.
Yes.
You know, these elaborate treatments, the script, how they, you know, weave this technology into, you know, this torture that never ends. So it's amazing technology, and there's just so much more to it than what we've discussed. So, you know, again, we can talk forever about it. I can't thank you enough. You know, I just hope people continue to watch, you know, our podcast and all of your podcasts, but especially mine, if you want to understand what this torture is doing. It's so difficult to explain to people who are just being hit randomly with things and they're not sure how to describe it. You know, they're using it in so many different ways in different people's, you know, voice to skull programs, that it's very difficult for us to convey it, especially when our brains have been destroyed. So while we have someone who can speak, you know, let's use them, you know, to get the story out, and so you can describe exactly what these programs are doing. And that's what we're pleading. Our victims are pleading out there. We don't want to die. We don't want to die. But it's around the corner for a lot of us. It's around the corner, and we're trying to stop it. But the only way to stop it is to communicate the horror of these programs. They are terrible. It's the culmination of all of these things you've read about, you know, the non-consensual experimentation, the MK Ultra, the COINTELPRO, you know, the Monarch, and these stories, and I've heard names, you know, slips my mind, but this poor woman who was, you know, went through electroshock therapy, and at a institution where she went, her parents, you know, left her at for something, you know, for an attitude adjustment or something. I mean, and she wrote a book, and there's a good documentary about her, and forgive me, I can't remember her name,
Well,
but you know,
you're
this
talking
evil
about
science,
you and
you know,
Cameron's patients, right? You and Cameron's patient
yeah,
that guy
yeah,
up in Canada who was a psychiatrist and head of the APA and this and that, but was basically a sadistical torturer. Yeah.
yeah,
One
yeah.
experiments
It's
on his patients. I think there were quite a few. Linda McDonald, Kathleen Watterson, not Watterson, what is the last name? Kathleen. I have to look it up. But there's a few who've
I
been
can't
so
remember. One
tortured.
of them showed she found the doctor's records years later, the number of bolts, you know, that she was given, and they were, you know, you know, they were, and I forget, you know, how many volts they were giving her, but they were, you know, extended. They were given for extended periods of time, and then and in high numbers, like 50, you know, 6-minute bolts, you know, of electricity. And you know, this is the mindset of these scientists. What can the brain deal with? You know, how much trauma can we give it before, you know, it rewires or the personality changes? And that's what they're doing. I mean, that's
And
what.
you know, they're couching it now in stories of, you know, we're studying Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and pancreatic cancer, and we're trying to find cures for these things, and these are all being done for a good cause. So you see, these are all the cover stories, the cover upon cover, and all the many different industries that are involved. You know, the medical industry, the psychiatrist, the pharmaceutical industry, the guys who create the little neurostems and the brain chips, the RFID industry, etc., etc. So you see, you're right, and you know everything that you're talking about, Chris. I think we need to bring out again and hold before the public once again, and you know, and certainly through podcasts, through informative conversations and interviews, and you know, just lectures. I think we do need to bring these up again and again and again. So, and I think we will do it. I think we've started, and we will indeed do it. So I really, really thank you for coming forward and for, you know, telling your story, for speaking out, and for bringing to us the intensity and the gravity of the situation. It's extremely sobering, extremely serious. And, you know, I certainly recognize that. And I think there are many of us who are hearing stories like this who do recognize it. And, you know, we're all making steps in our own minuscule way to get these stories heard by a larger audience. And my hope is that,
Yeah.
you know, we'll certainly continue. And it will indeed get there. We'll indeed go there. So my audio is being hacked again, as you can tell. Apparently, recurring scenario at this end. So we should probably close. So let me thank you once again very much for having come forward. If there's any last things you'd like to say.
Oh, well, thank you, Romola. Thank you as always. You know, I'm sorry if I kind of jumped around here. I'd hope, you know, I really want to, you know, convey this in a way that's easy to talk about for people. So if everyone can kind of hang in there with me and watch part 3 if we do one, and we'll try to get across everything that that people need to know about this story and the story of others, which are so similar, you know, and so they can describe these patterns and they can describe the stuff in a way that makes a person think, wow, that is strange.
Mm-hmm.
That is strange. And with what happened in Cuba, they can make that connection, and all of a sudden, you know, there's a person listening to you now, and that's what, you know, we all need. So, Romola, you're just amazing, and it's so wonderful to be able to work with you on this. And I look forward to releasing the print interview that goes into detail about this. And I'm going to use this to send to academics. I'm creating a promotional, a media sort of packet, but just a 3 or 4 pager because communicating this stuff to academics is very important. I'm going to draw out all the similarities in other victims' testimonies, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to talk to people, and you know, the interview is about 27, or I don't know what it, maybe it's 30 pages now, but it details everything about this Manchurian Candidate project. That's what Voice to Skull is. It's the Manchurian Candidate project. Just name something else, you know. So I can't thank you enough, Ramol. I'm sorry that we went over too.
It's okay. Thank you. You know, whatever, like I said, whatever audio hacking again. Whatever we did today, whatever conversation we've had, and wherever we've gone, I think so much of it needed to be said. Everything needed to be said, really. And everywhere we went is an important place to go. And the reason it's been perhaps been a little bit disjointed today is because, you know, there have been so many little alleyways of thought that we needed to explore. And I think we did that. So to that extent, you know, I hope we've achieved something. And I hope that we've conveyed to people watching this that there are really no good ways to talk about this program. This is a torture program. And to look at the newspapers online and to see the CIA torture scenario being downplayed to such an extent is absolutely laughable when these stories are coming out from people around the world and around the country. So, you know, this is vital, and we'll continue to talk about it, and we'll continue to reveal more about it as we know. I do want to tell people that Chris is right. The print interview will be out very soon. It's very detailed and has a lot of this information in print. Chris is a brilliant writer, and we've worked a little bit to fine-tune the flow so that the whole story is laid out. But we will pick up this conversation. And we'll have part 3 of the podcast coming up soon. So I thank everybody for watching us. Thanks for hanging in there, including the hackers who can't seem to get away from my taking over my computer. And
yeah,
sadly. So
thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone. Thank you again, Chris, and we'll see you again very soon. We'll come back with part 3. Thank you and goodbye.